I never believed in ghosts. Not really. But that night at Ravenhurst Station changed everything. It was a long abandoned train station tucked away in a forgotten part of town. The tracks were rusted, the old ticket booth covered in graffiti, and the waiting benches warped with age. No one had set foot here in years. At least, no one living. I didn't go there on a dare or some thrill-seeking adventure. I had reason. My grandfather used to work at Ravenhurst before it was shut down in the late 80s. He told me stories, strange ones, about trains that arrived with no passengers and voices whispering over the intercom long after the power had been cut. As a kid, I thought they were just old man's tales. But when he passed away last month, I found something. His journal. And inside, one final entry. If you ever find yourself at Ravenhurst past midnight, don't listen to the announcements. No matter what they say, don't get on the train. It sounded ridiculous, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was trying to warn me. So, on a cold October night, I went. Just to see. Just to prove to myself that it was nothing more than a crumbling station with a few eerie stories attached to it. The wind howled through the empty tunnels as I stepped onto the platform. The only sound was the rhythmic dripping of water from the ceiling. Everything felt still, too still. The air was thick, heavy, like the place itself was holding its breath. Then the speakers crackled to life. Attention passengers, the midnight train is arriving on platform 2. The station had no power, no staff, no trains scheduled for decades. And yet beneath my feet, I felt the vibrations of something approaching. That was when I realized I was not alone. I froze. The announcement echoed through the station, distorted and crackling like a voice from another time. My breath hitched as I stared at the rusted speaker above me. There was no way it could be working. No power, no staff, just an empty station left to rot. Then I felt it. A deep low vibration beneath my feet. The tracks trembled ever so slightly, as if something massive was hurtling toward the station. But that was impossible. The last train to pass through Ravenhurst had been over 30 years ago. I swallowed hard and stepped closer to the edge of the platform, peering down the dark tunnel. For a long moment, there was nothing. Just a void of pitch-black silence stretching endlessly in both directions. But then, faint at first, I heard it. A distant chugging. The slow rhythmic grind of wheels on metal. My body tensed. It was coming closer. The air grew thick with the smell of burning coal and rusted iron, an acrid scent that stung my nostrils. A gust of wind rushed through the station, carrying with it something else, something foul. It smelled like damp earth, like rotting wood, like old forgotten things buried deep underground. I took a step back, heart hammering against my ribs. Maybe this was just an echo of the past, a trick of the wind. But then the overhead lights flickered, one by one. The ancient fluorescent bulbs sputtered to life, casting a sickly yellow glow over the empty platform. The ticket booth, the waiting benches, the peeling posters of long-forgotten advertisements. Everything was suddenly bathed in dim, artificial light, as if the station had awakened from its long slumber. And then I heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the far end of the platform. I turned sharply, my eyes scanning the empty station. Nothing. Just shadows stretching unnaturally along the walls. The footsteps grew louder, closer. I wasn't alone. My breathing became shallow, my instinct screaming at me to run. But my legs wouldn't move. The rational part of my brain told me this was impossible. No one was supposed to be here. No one could be here. And yet, excuse me, a voice right behind me. I spun around so fast I nearly lost my balance. There was no one there, just an empty bench, a flickering light, the cold, stagnant air pressing in around me. But I could still feel it. A presence, a weight in the atmosphere, like unseen eyes watching my every move. The speakers crackled again. Final boarding call for the midnight train. Please stand clear of the platform edge. And then I heard the train's whistle, a long, mournful sound that sent ice crawling up my spine. I turned toward the tunnel, my heart pounding. The train was here, but something was terribly, terribly wrong. I stood frozen as the whistle echoed through the station, stretching into an eerie wail that didn't quite sound human. The vibrations beneath my feet grew stronger, shaking the dust loose from the rafters. The tunnel ahead remained pitch black, but I could feel something emerging from it, something massive. Then the train appeared. It rolled in slowly, its metal frame groaning and screeching, as if the wheels hadn't touched tracks in decades. The engine was ancient, a black iron beast, covered in soot and grime, its headlights dim and flickering. I could barely make out the faded logo on its side, something my grandfather once mentioned in his stories, Black Hollow Line. But that train line had been shut down ages ago. I stepped back, my instincts screaming at me to run, but my body refused to obey. The train kept moving, its carriages rattling as it pulled into the station. The windows were dark, coated in grime, so thick I couldn't see inside. But as it slowed to a stop, I noticed something even more unsettling. The doors. They creaked open in perfect unison, but no one got out. No passengers, no conductor. Just yawning, empty doorways leading into darkness. And then, the cold hit me. It wasn't just a chill. It was a deep, penetrating cold that sank into my bones. My breath came out in visible puffs, and my fingers went numb. The once flickering lights overhead turned deathly still, humming with an unnatural silence. That was when I noticed the shadows. Not my own, not the rusted beams overhead, but something else. Shapes shifting along the platform, stretching unnaturally, moving in ways that defied logic. Then, "You shouldn't be here." The whisper came from right beside me. I spun, my heart hammering against my ribs. No one was there, but I knew I wasn't alone. A sudden gust of wind rushed past me, carrying with it the scent of mildew and something rotten, something dead. My grandfather's warning echoed in my mind. No matter what they say, don't get on the train. I took another step back, ready to bolt, when I saw it, a reflection in the train's window. A figure, tall and unmoving, standing behind me. I turned so fast I nearly fell, but there was no one there, only the empty platform. But when I looked back at the window, the figure was still there. It wasn't my reflection. It was watching me. And then, it moved. A skeletal hand pressed against the glass from the inside, its fingers too long, too thin. The glass shuddered as if something was trying to push through. I heard a faint tapping, rhythmic, deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. The train doors let out a low hiss. The air felt heavier, like the atmosphere itself was pressing down on me, trying to force me forward. The whispering started again, but now it wasn't just one voice. It was dozens. "Come aboard. It's time. We've been waiting for you." The shadow slithered across the floor, stretching toward my feet. I stumbled back, my breathing ragged. Then the overhead lights shattered. Darkness swallowed the station, and for a split second, everything was silent. Then came the footsteps, rushing, coming straight for me. I didn't think, I ran. I bolted toward the exit, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. But as I reached the stairs, the wind picked up again, fierce, howling, pushing against me like unseen hands trying to drag me back. And then, the final announcement came. The train is departing. Last chance to board. I glanced over my shoulder. The figure was standing in the doorway now. No face, no eyes. Just an empty void where its features should have been, and yet, I knew it was staring at me. The doors began to slide shut. The train let out one final whistle, and then it started moving. I watched, my chest heaving, as the ghostly locomotive disappeared back into the tunnel, swallowed by the blackness. The wind died down, the station fell silent, and the lights flickered back on. The platform was empty again, no train, no figures, nothing. But as I stood there, trembling, I realized something chilling. There was a ticket in my hand, and my name was printed on it. I stared at the ticket in my hand, my fingers trembling. It hadn't been there before. I didn't remember picking it up. I didn't remember anything except running for my life. But there it was, a worn yellow train ticket, edges curled and brittle, like it had been sitting in someone's pocket for decades. The ink was faded, yet somehow I could still read it clearly. One-way ticket, midnight train passenger, my name, status, departed. Departed? A chill crawled up my spine. My instinct screamed at me to drop it, to get out of there, but I couldn't move. It felt like my feet were glued to the ground, as if something was still holding me in place. I forced myself to look around. The station was normal again. The lights buzzed faintly, the ticket booth sat abandoned, and the platform stretched empty before me. The tunnel where the train had vanished was now just a gaping black hole, silent and still. Had it really happened? Had I imagined it all? But the cold remained. That unnatural, bone-deep chill clung to me, wrapping around my lungs, my throat, my mind. And the ticket. The ticket was still in my hand. Suddenly the air shifted, a soft shuffle of movement. I wasn't alone. Slowly, terrified to look, I turned my head, and I saw them. Figures standing at the far end of the platform. Shadowed, motionless, watching. There were dozens of them. Men, women, even children, their faces blurred like smudged ink on old paper. They stood side by side in eerie silence, their outlines flickering like candlelight, like they weren't fully there. And then, one stepped forward, a man in a tattered conductor's uniform. His hat sat low over his face, but I could see just enough. The hollowness of his cheeks, the unnatural stretch of his lips as he smiled. A smile too wide, too unnatural. His voice slithered through the air. "You missed your train." I couldn't breathe. The shadows behind him began shifting, restless, eager. I took a step back. My legs felt weak, unsteady, like I was standing at the edge of something bottomless. The conductor tilted his head, as if studying me. Then, he reached up and tapped the brim of his hat. A simple gesture. But I understood the message perfectly. Next time, there won't be a choice. I didn't wait. I turned and ran. I sprinted up the stairs, my lungs burning, my pulse pounding in my ears. The walls of the station seemed to close in around me, the air thick with whispers, my name being called over and over. But I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I burst through the rusted exit doors and collapsed onto the cracked pavement outside. The night was deathly still, no wind, no sound. Just my own ragged breathing. I forced myself to turn around. The station was dark, silent, empty, no flickering lights, no figures, no sign that anything had happened at all except the ticket was still in my hand. And when I flipped it over, new words had appeared on the back. Next departure soon.